Welcome back to another Juicy... Sorry, my chair moved and made a weird noise. Welcome back to another Juicy React. Thank you so much for clicking on the video.
Yes, we hope you are enjoying the content recently. Hope you're all doing well wherever you are, whatever you're up to in the world. Today we have, why are there so many Filipino nurses in the US? Now, this was a request, so if you guys want to send us any requests, the best place to do that is on our Instagram. So there is a link in the... No, not a link. There are our handles in the description, and we should have this cool, thing that comes on the screen. So head over to Instagram, follow us on there, send us a message, anything that you've seen, you want us to react to. If you enjoyed the video today, we would appreciate a thumbs up and a subscription. And if you want to, you can check out our main YouTube channel, The Juicy Vlog, link is in the description. But we'll get into the video. Why are there so many Filipino nurses in the UK? I don't know why.
In the US.
In the US, sorry. I don't know what this video is about.
I think it's going to be about why there's so many Filipino nurses in the US.
Hilarious. For the first time with you guys today, so we'll get straight in. 3, 2, 1.
Immigrants, we get the job done, or so the song goes. So we all know that when it comes to labor, the United States loves immigrants. And one of the most unique stories of American immigration and labor actually comes from the Philippines. In particular, it's the story of Filipino women who became nurses throughout the country's hospitals. Hey guys, I'm Sana.
There's a lot in the UK as well.
This Sunday, I want to talk a bit about why there are so many Filipino nurses in the United States and what that says about the history of Filipino Americans and Filipino labor.
Interesting to know some history, actually.
Yeah, I think so too.
Okay, so you might be saying, Sana, the US has a lot of Filipino nurses? Yep. Here's what's up. Back in 2015, foreign-born Filipinos made up the 4th largest group of immigrants in the country. And the majority of Filipinos are in California, where they make up 20% of the nursing force, which is impressive when you consider that they only make up about 4% of the state's population. Now, it's easy to think of the Philippines as all the way over there, and the United States right over here. But Dr. Catherine Sneeza Choi, who wrote the book Empire of Care, says that imagining Filipinos as simply foreigners actually erases a history between the countries.
Filipinos, and specifically certain groups of Filipino immigrant workers, like immigrant nurses, are not foreigners in the way we tend to think about foreigners. They actually have historical interaction with Americans.
And that interaction begins like so many other immigrant interactions, with colonization. The Spanish colonized and ruled the archipelago we now call the Republic of the Philippines for a few centuries. In 1898, the Americans and the Spanish went to war, and it ended with the signing of the Treaty of Paris. As a result, the Americans got a lot of territories from the Spanish, one of which was the Philippines. But the people of the islands didn't welcome the Americans. They wanted their independence, not more colonizers. That resistance led to the 3-year-long Philippines-American War from 1899 to 1902, and it was fought between U.S. forces and Filipino nationalists. And it was a brutal war for Filipinos. It killed 20,000 combatants and 200,000 civilians as a result of the violence, diseases like cholera and malaria, and even famine. When the war ended, the Philippines came under the colonial control of the United States. And that's when the story of the Filipino nurses begins. Like in its other colonies, the United States began the Americanization of the islands after setting up a government in the Philippines.
You also had American colonial officials going to the Philippines and exposing Filipinos to American culture, to the English language, to Americanized education. And this kind of training influenced so many different groups of Filipinos to dream about the U.S. and to desire to migrate there.
American health workers in the Philippines needed locals to deal with the health issues of Filipinos because malaria and cholera had killed so many during the war. But they didn't find any nurses trained the way the Americans had been trained. And so they began recruiting Filipino women to work as what were called volunteer auxiliary and contract nurses. Around the same time in 1903, President William Taft passed a law that allowed and funded certain Filipino students to study in American colleges. And this led to the first wave of Filipino nurses coming to the United States, and it also led to a lot of the nurses staying. They even established their presence with organizations like the Philippine Nurses Association of New York, and the waves of Filipino nurse migration continued throughout the 20th century, especially as the United States opened up its borders. During World War II, more Filipino nurses were trained to serve in the U.S. military, and during the same time, the Philippines came under Japanese occupation. After the war ended, the United States granted the territory independence in 1946, and 2 years later, the State Department introduced the Exchange Visitor Program, a little something created to push back against Soviet influence. You know, bring more people into the United States and show them what the capitalist good life is actually all about. Because of the decades-long colonial relationship and education in English language, the Philippines became a model country for the program, and the nurses led the way. The program was so successful that it actually encouraged more Filipinos to go into nursing. The number of nurses in the Philippines jumped over 700%,
Whoa.
from 7,000 in 1948 to over 57,000 in 1953.
In only a few years,
The
it's
program
crazy.
also encouraged the building of more nursing schools in the Philippines. Back in 1940, there were only 10, and today, 429. That program, in addition to the 1965 Immigration Act, opened up the borders even more for educated Filipinos. And so by 1973, we end up seeing over 12,000 Filipino nurses immigrate to the United States. But I gotta mention this, it wasn't just because of American immigration policies that so many Filipinos were migrating to the US. In the 1970s, with President Ferdinand Marcos, who ruled under martial law, a policy of labor export was introduced. The whole idea behind the export of labor was that Filipinos would travel abroad on work contracts, make money, send it back home, and thus help a struggling economy. The government even created an agency that directly provided migrant labor to foreign governments and companies. That policy pretty much made the Philippines one of the top exporters of labor. I mean, check this. About 10%
And that's kind of still what's going on now, right?
Yeah.
Foreign workers. That's around 10 million people in around 170 different countries. And did the policy of exporting labor actually work for the
That's why there's so many
Well,
FWs.
for decades, the Philippines has been one of the top 5 recipients of money transfers from migrant labor. Shout out to Western Union. Not sponsored. Take, for instance, how in 2015, over 3 million Filipinos left the country to work abroad. They sent back $28.5 billion, which made up about 1/10 of the Philippines' total GDP. So exported labor is a big deal for the Philippines, and it really does get to the heart of the Filipino immigrant experience, whether in a country like Saudi Arabia or in the United States. And it's equally important to note that despite the so-called success of the export of Filipino labor, it's come with a lot of sacrifice, struggle, and vulnerability. Take, for example, Filipino nurses here in the United States who are professionals but still face discrimination.
The vulnerability of being immigrant nurses can also be connected to being exploited by being assigned sometimes the most undesirable kinds of work on the
That's a
nursing
shame.
floor, or being assigned on the most undesirable shifts. Unfortunately, they are not the kinds of challenges we often think about in the United States that these women would have because they are professional immigrant workers.
But even though exported or imported labor is central to Filipino migration, especially to the United States, that's not the only part of the Filipino immigrant experience. In the United States, Filipinos, both citizens and immigrants, have used their experiences to fight for workers' rights. In fact, one of the biggest labor movements in the United States was sparked by Filipino laborers. In 1965, Filipino grape farm workers in Delano, California, went on strike against poor working conditions and low wages. Farm workers across the country joined in on the strike, which eventually led to an international boycott of grapes. The 5-year strike ended with a major win for the farm workers. They got union contracts that protected them. So Filipinos, immigrants, and citizens have been and remain a central part of the U.S.'s social fabric. They've not only provided labor in industries that needed it the most, but at times have also protected it. So we just covered Filipino nurses in the United States.
Really,
and
really
we've also
cool.
talked in the
That's
past
crazy.
about
Yeah.
Indian American.
That's really cool. I feel like
It's nice
there's
to know
more,
the history.
Yeah, there's more to it than you think.
Yeah.
In my head, I was like, oh yeah, there's a load of FWs, but I didn't think into it as to why and
How it started
happened.
and how
Yeah.
successful it's been for the country.
That's so interesting. I can't believe
So
how
like
much you
less
said that.
than, what I took from that is less than 10% of the population work abroad,
Yeah.
but around 10% of the total income, GDP in the country is from that.
Yeah.
So that's quite efficient, isn't it?
Really efficient, definitely.
Obviously there's that stories, like we have spoken to FWs who miss their home, miss their families, so of course there's like two sides to it.
Yeah.
But that's really interesting to look at that. So thanks to whoever requested that one.
I wonder if there's any that talk about why there's so many in the UK, in like Saudi Arabia, like she was saying.
Like, there's a lot in the UK. Even in our local hospital in our town, so our family have had like dealings with Filipino nurses, and they've all said that they're just amazing. So really, really cool.
Really interesting.
Thanks for watching today. Hope you enjoyed it. Please give the video a thumbs up if you did, and we'll see you in the next Juicy Reacts.